Good morning. I'm Bob Braddock, Senior Project Advisor for the Jordan Cove Energy Project. And before I get into our little brief on our particular project and how it impacts the folks here in this room, I'd like to give a little recap of what we did yesterday afternoon. It was quite amazing in terms of my perspective. The idea of pulling the activities that are occurring within the Uintah Basin and the Piceance Basin and tying them together for the benefit of all of the folks in the area, and tying them in a way to our project. And to me, that's something we have talked about in the past, but seeing all you folks in the room starts to make it a bit more real. And what I'd like to do this morning is to really dig a little deeper than we did yesterday during our little panel discussion, to provide you some background of why Jordan Cove, a project that's 1,000 miles away from here in Coos Bay, Oregon, has significant bearing on what may or may not happen in the Uintah and the Piceance Basins. So with that, I'll move it along once I can master the pointer. A little background. If most of you have had any experience in the area for any length of time, you realize that historically the Piceance Basin and the Uintah Basins have both been short of takeaway capacity for natural gas. The original pipeline system built by Williams, the Northwest Pipeline, that goes up the eastern side of Utah and crisscrosses back and forth on the Colorado border up to Opal, Wyoming, and then off into the Pacific Northwest, was really the primary corridor. In the 80s, we had additional pipelines, but always there had been production exceeding takeaway capacity. This was alleviated basically in the 90s to some extent by the addition of the Rex pipeline, and ultimately in 2009 by the construction of the Ruby pipeline, which brought gas from Opal to Malin, Oregon. And the importance of that is the Ruby pipeline was the first pipeline that actually gave producers access to directly to the northern California market from the north. Historically, that had been dominated by Canadian producers. Canadian gas has historically provided the majority of gas into Northern California via what was originally built as the Pacific Gas Transmission Pipeline, which tied in California to the Alberta border. What happened, though, when the Ruby came in, it came in right at the time that a series of other activities were taking place. And what you saw is the development of shale plays in other parts of the country. So now you have a Rex pipeline to the east, a Ruby pipeline taking gas out of here to the west, but you now start to see the tight gas shale formations being developed elsewhere to the east that is starting to take away traditional markets from the Rocky Mountain producers. So now you have production in the stack play and the scoop play in Oklahoma. You've got production, co-produced gas coming out of the Basin. You've got the Permian being redeveloped. So what is it essentially done is it has boxed in production from the western side of the Rockies, and it's really the only place it can go is to the west. And through the Ruby pipeline, the problem there is California is a pretty well saturated market, and in fact with a charter trying to wean themselves off of fossil fuels. Well, what we can do, and we're Jordan Cove, a project located in Coos Bay, Oregon, designed to export natural gas in the form of LNG. And you may have heard a lot about it, may know a lot about LNG, but The importance there is that essentially it substitutes for a pipeline by liquefying the LNG so that you have an energy density about 600 times that of gas. That allows you to ship it as a cryogenic liquid at minus 260 degrees F in specially designed vessels for foreign markets. So what that specifically does is gives a producer access to a market that he otherwise could not reach. And in our case, the target market is Asia. In Asia, they are highly reliant on LNG. The largest LNG user in the world is Japan. They actually consume, at present, approximately 1/3 of all the LNG shipped internationally. But if you look further down the supply chain, you see that, or the demand chain, you see that we have the top 5 consumers of LNG in the world all positioned around the Pacific Rim. Japan is followed by North Korea, they're followed by China, they're followed by India, and followed up by Taiwan. Between them, 75% of the global LNG is consumed. And if you look at that list, while Japan and North Korea probably are pretty well stabilized in their consumption, China and India are a booming market, and to be followed by Pakistan, Bangladesh, and others that are deficient on energy and are seeking clean energy supplies to avoid long-term reliance on coal. And it's a worldwide pattern, but from the Pacific Rim, you have opportunities to access these additional markets. The LNG facility that is being proposed by Jordan Cove is a 1 BCF a day facility. It also includes a 230-mile interconnecting pipeline that allows the facility to tie in at Malin, Oregon, where it gains direct access to the Ruby pipeline for gas from here, but it also gets direct access to Canadian gas through the GTN, or Gas Transmission Northwest pipeline, that brings in gas into Northern California. So while there is competition for Rockies gas at the location where we would be able to have our customers pick up gas and deliver it to our facility, it does provide the direct infrastructure connectivity. It is not a trivial project. It's about an $8 billion investment. We're already into this project many hundreds of million, and expect to move to construction in about 2 years. I'll give you the details of that later. But essentially, it is gaining access to a new market for resources that are bottled up here in the West. The facility at Coos Bay is a marine facility. It allows us to take the LNG, or the natural gas that is delivered to the facility, clean it up, remove the water, CO2, trace heavy hydrocarbons, any residual mercury, and liquefy it, convert it to a liquid, put it in storage tanks, and ultimately load it on a ship that is destined for the Far East. This particular vessel has a capacity of over 3 BCF a day of gas equivalent, and it's fairly typical of the vessels used in this type of service. To put everything in context, I mentioned it yesterday, our 1 BCF a day production and output capacity is approximately equal to the entire production in Utah each day over the year. So in other words, we are creating a market that is essentially equal to that Utah has already. We have the capacity to expand that facility should future global markets justify. This is one of our customers' facilities in Japan. This is a TEPCO facility, Tokyo Electric Power. They are a participant in JERA, which is a joint venture between them and Chubu Electric. They have currently signed up for approximately 25% of our terminal's capacity. The other 25 is currently committed to Itochu, second largest trading company in Japan, and we are negotiating for the remaining capacity with other users, and hopefully we'll have them under contract within the next year, certainly, but targeting some for even later this year. The importance of this particular facility is you see an LNG carrier there. TEPCO has 5 of these terminals around Tokyo Bay. They receive a vessel like this every 18 hours. They bring in, they themselves, Tokyo Electric Power, consumes over 3 or 3.5 to 4 BCF a day, and all of that is delivered in the form of LNG. The markets that are currently supplying Japan with LNG are predominantly based in Asia and the Pacific. Historically, Japan has received approximately 30% of their LNG from what the countries I refer to as Oceania, Indonesia, Brunei, Malaysia. They're currently getting around 21% from Australia. They get around 30% from the Middle East, with predominantly coming from Qatar. They are also, at present, currently receiving 10% of their gas via LNG from Sakhalin Island, from Russia. So if you add them up, they have about 8% that's not accounted for, and that is brought in by the various other locations around the world under spot markets. What you have is a void. There is no LNG going into Japan under contract from the U.S. That is going to change as facilities in the Gulf Coast have been put online. We have one facility online now, the Cheniere facility in Sabine Pass, but others are soon to follow. There will be, by the time all of those currently under construction are built out in 2020, an approximately 11 BCF a day of LNG export facility operating in the Gulf, ramping up at the rate of about 2 BCF a year. Cheniere came on last year and over the year exported about 0.5 BCF a day. So far this year, they're up to 1.5 BCF a day, and it's ramping up. But again, all of these facilities are located clustered in the Gulf area, and we have some proposed facilities along with Jordan Cove in the Northwest, but all the other facilities in the Northwest are located in BC, or proposed to be located in BC. None of those have broken ground, neither has Jordan Cove, so we're somewhat in a race to access the Pacific market from the Northwest, and that is important because one of the things that the end users in LNG, as in any gas supply, are looking for is diversity of supply and reliability of supply. Diversity of supply gives them political diversity, and that is why they are very anxious to lift gas out of North America. They currently don't have it in their portfolio. They want to add it to their portfolio. It provides geopolitical clout, stronger ties with the U.S., which is very important in an uncertain world, but it also gives them geographic diversity because, as we've seen in the past week, the events in the Gulf Coast can bring the energy industry to somewhat of a, if not a standstill, it certainly puts a crimp in it. And when you are dealing with LNG supply to keep the lights on in Tokyo, and you don't have an enormous amount of indigenous supply to back it up, you have got to be able to find ways to keep that supply chain moving uninterruptedly. And diversity of location gives you that. So nobody wants to buy all their gas from the Middle East. Nobody wants to get it all from Australia. And the one missing player in this game is North America, and they want to get it from North America. But on the other hand, they don't want to get it all from the Gulf Coast because a weather condition that can upset one facility can, given the clustering of them, upset them all. So the unique advantages that we provide in the Pacific Northwest is a very different weather regime, shorter transit times, but also access to different markets or supply sources for the gas. So we have access, direct access to the market here, Uintah Basin and the Piceance Basin. We also have direct access to the Western Canadian Sedimentary Basin. This versatility of supply is what makes our project appealing. Your presence is what makes our project appealing. The ability to be able to go back to the wellhead to contract gas is important. We have a shipping distance benefit. It takes half the time to ship a cargo from the Northwest to Tokyo than it does through the Panama Canal. This is important because when you're dealing with a steady flow of cargoes, you need ships to do this. Each of these vessels that are used range in cost from $250 million to $300 million a pop. It's a big difference. So by having shorter transit times, fewer vessels, gives them less exposure to weather uncertainties as in the transit route. The Jordan Cove project has the benefits of again, we have started down the path. There have been a number of interruptions as we've taken us to this point, but looking forward, we will be into FERC with our application this coming month and do expect full permitting approvals by the latter part of next year with an FID in early 2019 with an in-service date, because of the long construction period for these facilities, of 2024. And at the end of that, we do expect to be able to move cargoes of LNG sourced from the Uintah Basin and the Piceance Basin to supply the customers in Japan. And we see the benefit of all the players along the distribution channel. Bringing new customers to you and matching you up with users in Japan is a win-win for everyone along the chain, and we are really pleased to be here together to present a little bit more information. I know we've gone through it pretty quickly. If you'd like to know more, Michael Heinrichs is here, and he's over there, and he'll be around, hopefully answer any of your questions you might have. And if you can buttonhole me or track me down, I'll do whatever I can. But I do, again, want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today. We're very excited about how all of you have been engaged, and look forward for the future on it. Thank you.